Hello, students. Good evening. Here again, I'm going to start with common problems with translation. So, we had already discussed earlier, and one part I have made, but then what I found that if I speak afterwards, then there will be no link. That is why I'm uh, s- going to speak from beginning. So, listen, what is the common errors? So, first of all, we have already discussed that what's the translation is, right. Translation is something that's a source text and targeted language, right? So text is uh, to be translate to target language, right? So that is translation. And what is the common problems come, issues come. So first is general translation issues to be aware of. So first that is the first problem is that dissimilarity, similar language structure. So that's a, we had already discussed, that's a language structure, word order especially. So that's a word order is different. In English, that's a subject, verb and object. In Turkish, it's a subject, object and verb. Even in Hindi language, subject, object and verb. So that's a, here table is given, that's these are the this is the word order, and then this is number of languages follow this word order, and this is the percentage, those follow this word order, right? And then this is something we this data, that's a very good actually video where number of things are given, and very clearly they have made this they have provided this text. So I'm really thankful to the person who has that's a by this Nick, he has uh, given very, provided very good study material. So thank you so much, sir. Now here I would like to tell you that because of because first problem we have seen that, that is the word order, right? That's a one example, word order. So dissimilar language structure, word order is different, right? And number two is that sometime that's a this a um, Turkish word, right? And that one word, and the translation of this one word in English is, that's a five words. I am in the apartment, but then there one word in Turkish, that's I'm in the apartment, for this one word is enough. So that is another problem in translation that creates very big issue, right? So that is there. Now as a consequence, translating can come with quite a bit of rearranging. So that is somewhat, it's a rearranging, right? Depending on the languages involved. So the higher the complexities of the differences, the higher the difficulty of translating them. So that's the problem, right? Complexity and then difficulty of transfer, right? That is there. Now then, preserving tone. So tone is also, tone is too much. Tone means what? Tone means actually that's a what they say, that the tone is a central part of the text. For example, in branding, it is how you communicate, the voice you give your business, right? So that's a communication, and the voice is very important, right? It sets you apart from the competition, helps you connect with customers, right? And is recognizable in slogan, taglines, ads and more, right? Now to make sure it translates well in other languages, you have to pay attention to what constitutes tone. So that's a constitution of tone is what, right? Which is very important. That's a what constitutes a tone. So that's a diction, formality and rhythm. So diction is that your use of words, where whether they are simple or complex, right? So that's the words simple or complex is called, words simple or complex are called diction, right? And then from, so diction plays very important role in tone. Then suppose harsh tone, so harsh words will be there, right? And for same expression, right? So that's a For example, if you say that go, right, and you say go at once, so that's a different kind of expression, right? Then sometimes dictions are very important, like if you say that that's a uh, if you say that don't be rude to them or don't be harsh to them, so rude and harsh both are different words and different meanings, so this way tone is changed. Then formality, you can use informal and formal tone, so sometime informal or sometime formal tone, right? So that is formality. And then rhythm, the flow of words. Rhythm is flow of words, right? How to speak the words and use the words, that is rhythm. It's all come under the tone. And apart from this, humor, slang, cultural references, these are the part of tone, can also be the part of tone. All of this is hard to replicate one to one in another language, right? So that is very hard to replicate, to copy one to one in another language. So that's a very big problem, that slang cannot, word to word cannot, what one word here and the same copy cannot be cannot speak the same same idea cannot be delivered, right? So that's a big problem, and you need a skilled translator to do so. So then for this, that's a, we need to have a very efficient translator for doing so. And another option is to opt for a slightly different tone in your target language, right? So it might be different tone, but then you also need to make sure it is consistent, so that different tone but then the meaning should be delivered properly. So that's the next issue. Then dealing with compound words. Compound words are combinations of two or more different words, right, forming a new one. So some of them have a clear meaning directly related to their parts, like toothbrush, right? So that is clear meaning. However, their meaning can also be less direct, such as, so here toothbrush, uh, that's a have clear meaning, direct meaning, toothbrush, which is exclusively used for cleaning the brush, cleaning the tooth. But then, however, their meaning can also be less direct, such as bookworm. So here it's not direct, right? Bookworm. Bookworm is, that's a, while it is not really warm, it is a still paints and understandable picture of the person it describes, right? So that's a, there are also examples of compound words that have no relation to the object they describe, such as butterfly, right? So that is, butterfly is a different word, right? So that's a, what's the butter and then fly. So these kind of words is challenging, right? Of course, translating compound words like this needs a lot of skills. That's a uh, lots of knowledge and skills, right? Especially if they don't exist in the same way in the target language. You also need to know when not to take them literally. So that is important. By the way, a language well known for its use of long compound words in German. So I'm not going to teach, they're going to discuss, because I will not familiar with all these kind of example, but then it's okay. Now translating two word verbs, so that is also two word verbs, right? How two word verbs are the bane of language learners or around the world, having to memorize the difference between to break up, right, to break in, to break down. Who does not remember? So that is what they are saying, that's a boon for of language learners around the world, having to memorize the difference between to break up, we know that, to break in, we know, and to break down, that's a common, right? So these are called two word verbs, right? So two word verbs means two words are there, and then verbs, right? So that is called which is followed by, this is followed by preposition. Okay, so let us see that, so on the surface they are simply a combination of a verb and a preposition. However, together they take on a specific meaning that are very different from each other, and you have to translate them together, not separately, right? So that is very important, that you have to translate them together, not separately. How? For example, that's a, let me give one example of Hindi, that is khandan. So khan is mine and dan is donation, right? And khandan is generation, but then there is no khandan or generation is nothing to do with mine and donation, right? So that is a very great example in Hindi even. That's the two words are there, and then third meaning is there, khandan, right? So that's a, similarly here, that's a we have to find out the meaning together, not separately, right? So that's a, to break up, to break in, to break down. So not to break in this way, we cannot separate the word. Okay, of course this can also pose a problem with converting them from one language to another, right? So that's a problem. You need to be skilled in both the source and target language, which is very important, that you have to be have expertise in source and target language to transfer the meaning of two word verbs, right? So that is there. Now, words with multiple meanings. Another common issue in translation is that words can have more than one meaning, right? So that's a, especially depending on where they appear in a sentence. So you mainly run into two different cases here. So that's a, the next problem is, that's a common problem is that the words can have more than one meaning, right? So that is, words can have more than one meaning. For example, homonyms and heteronyms. Homonyms are the words which are spelled and pronounced in same way are called homonyms, right? So here skell and skell, right? They are pronounced in spell and pronounce in same way, but meaning is different. For example, scale the fish and put it on the scale, right? So scale the fish means, suppose this is the fish, right? And this is the scale. So scale, you have to find out the scale the fish and put in the scale means the, when we weigh, right? So scale the fish means clean the fish and then put it on the scale, right? Okay, now heteronyms, they took the same but have different meanings, right? And pronunciation. So then they look the same and but have different meanings. Just a, for example, tear off a piece of paper and wipe your tear with it, right? So that's a tear is, this tear is to be cut into pieces, and then tear is a, after crying tear comes in our eyes, that tear, right? So that is heteronym. So that's a problem, is that again translation is the biggest problem. So these two require knowing both language, require knowing both languages involved in the translation very well, otherwise you risk making a serious mistakes, right? So that is why, because further we will come to know how it can be a serious mistake. Humor and sarcasm. Next is humor and sarcasm. Humor in general can be problem in translation because it does not always convert well into another language, right? That of course is especially true for humor that relies on word plays to be funny, right? So that's a humor cannot be directly created with the same words or translation, replacement of the word. For example, if you say that that's a sometime you say that hefty dufty, right? And this type of words for a lady, right? Tumbuktu. So that's a Tumbuktu means the lady with who is a little bit fatty and moving this way. So then same expression cannot be translated when you create humor, right? And then I would like to give you example of Kapil Sharma show. So there are lots of uh, creation, lots of words which are used for humor, right? But that's if you translate its script into English, so that the same humor cannot be created, right? So this is a great example. You can see any laughter show, because Kapil Sharma show is right now it's coming, and that's why you are familiar with this show. So then a script you can listen, and what Hindi script he used for creating humor, and the same script if you create for English, so it cannot be done. And many one of my students she makes reels videos on creates humor, but then if I translate, I'm imagining that if I translate then into English, then that same humor can never be created, right? So that's a problem. A special case here is sarcasm. That is also a problem. It often expresses something that is quite the opposite of the words used, right? So sarcasm is that's the opposite of words used, right? And if you were to take or translate it literally, then you would not end up with the intended meaning, right? So that's a if you change it literally, so you would not be able to end up with the intended meaning, right? So here they have given example, I don't know, but yes, that's a sarcasm that many words are there, but then same sarcasm cannot be created when you translate into another language. So in humor you also have to take cultural concerns into consideration, right? That is very important, cultural concern, because some communities that is good, in some communities that is not acceptable. So that is cultural communication should also be taken into consideration, right? So something that might be a joke in one language can be a harsh insult in another, right? So that is depends, that's their culture does not allow, or some are very open, so that depends, that is a different story, right? Therefore you have to work with nuances, right? Very small things you have to take care, so that the intent works in both language. More on that, so right? So that is there. Now name translation. Translating names can be challenge. This is especially for names that are originally in non-Latin script. For example, the former leader of China can either be written Mao uh, Zedong, right? Zedong, or Mao Zedong, right? Depending on which translate transliteration you use, right? In a translation you have to make a choice and stick with it, right? So once you have choose, so then same will be followed, right? So that is there. Now comparison of this words I am not familiar, so I am just skipping this part, okay? Now lack of knowledge on the subject matter were very important. Translation is first and foremost in linguistic endeavor, right? So that is linguistic endeavor is, so that's a, you have to possess the general knowledge, right? General knowledge is very important of how to transfer text from one language to another, right? So general knowledge, subject knowledge you have to have, not only language but subject knowledge is also important part of the translation. So that's a, however, another consideration is the subject of what you are translating. So that subject expert must be there along with knowledge language competency, you need to have good knowledge of the subjects, that is important, and you need to have sufficient knowledge of what a text is talking about, right? So that is, you need to have sufficient knowledge of what a text is talking about, as well, to make sure it ends up correct. Means very objectively you cannot translate any material mechanically, you cannot change it into another language. You have to know the crux, you have to know the gist of the passage, gist of the article, that's the idea what they are telling, then only you will be able to justify. Otherwise, mechanically you cannot translate one source material to target material. That's very important, right? Imagine translating a medical or legal text or instructions for how to use dangerous chemicals. It's a very big challenge and very serious concern. Without having a clue on that topic, the outcome could be disastrous. Very important. This is a very, very important part, that if you have translated and then meaning is just being changed for dangerous chemicals and all, so then meaning will be changed. It can create chaos. It's very dangerous, right? So here you must have got the importance, that's how subject knowledge is very important. And that is why translators often specialize in one or two subject matters, so they have enough knowledge to keep that from happening. So then they will be able to translate it properly, right? Now, design and layout issues, especially in website translation, you can often run into problems what with layout and design because of translation. Especially Asian characters based languages are often much shorter than equivalent text in Western alphabets, right? Since each character is an entire word or syllable, right? So that is very important. And design and layout issues, so website translation, you can often run into problems with a layout and design because of translation. Especially Asian character based on languages are often much shorter. So Asian characters are languages are much shorter, right? And then equivalent text in Western alphabets, so that's a Western alphabet's a bigger one since each character. So that is the problem, right? Okay. Now plus you have some languages that run from right to left instead of the other way around. Finally, website text is most often accompanied by images, which can also contain text or target specific locals. So you have some languages that run from right to left, that is also a problem. So that is run from right to left, so that is the direction. Okay. And that is the problem, right to left instead of other way around. Finally, website text is most often accompanied by images, and website text accompanied by images, so that is also source of communication, which can also contain text or target specific locals. So this way, for example, this is a very good example, that's a Nova, right? So that's a stacker. And then uh, this is the advertisement communication and all. So that how can you translate this collectively, this material into other language, that's a again problem, right? So this is, you must please notice this language, this is right. So all of that has a bearing on the website design and can mess up the original layout. Something to keep in mind when converting your website into other languages. So that's a problem. Now, expensive and time consuming. A more practical problem with translation is that hiring a translator is not always cheap, especially for rare language pairs. That is money you could use for other things like growing your website or business. Or if you go the cheap way, the quality might not be good enough. So that's a hiring translator is also a big problem because of expenses you have to pay a lot. And then plus translation can be time intensive. After receiving to translation, you have to review it to make sure it is accurate for your line of work. Machine translation can help, but it has its problem in comparison to manual translation. So that is a problem. Machine translation is good in some way, and then manual translation is good in another way, and sometimes hybrid. But it's a difficult process actually. However, you should also view these as an investment. A properly translated website can bring in new business and expand your market. So it often ends up having a positive ROI, right? So that's a ultimately translation is the it's a if matter is translated very well, so it expands your business. Otherwise, it's a risky. Now, cultural issues in translation. What's the cultural issues we have little bit discussed earlier? In addition to general problems, you can also run into translation issues rooted in culture. What are the cultural issues? First, culture and language are tightly connected. First of all, it is important to keep in mind that language reflects the values, beliefs, customs, right? So, values, beliefs, customs, and traditions of the people who speak it. So, that is why different words can carry different meaning in a separate languages. In China, it used to be common to greet each other with "Have you eaten?" as food was not always available in the past, right? So that is culture is that what is in China it used to be common to greet each other with "Have you eaten?" as food was not always available in the past, right? So that is the problem. And then as you business, the words you use determine how different cultures perceive your brand, which is why transcreation and localization are so important. There are sometimes taboos and topics that can not be discussed or mentioned. Plus, it can go into other things like colors, images, layout, currency, time and date formats, units of measurement, etc. So ultimately, the culture and language are tightly connected. So Gandhiji has also told that culture and language cannot be separated; it is coexisted. So here also that if you learn language, definitely you learn or you are going to change culture. You are going to adopt culture as well. So that is language and culture because language is made for exchanging culture also once upon a time. So that is why we have to learn about the culture of that particular community. Then only you'll be able to justify, right? Otherwise it's a problem. Then idiom, expressions and slang, very big challenge. Everyday expressions can be very language specific and pose issues for translation. You often cannot take it uh, can't take them literally, and many derive from the language culture. So that is every expressions can be very language specific and pose issues for translation. So that's a problem in language. You can even have uh, expressions, right? With divergent meanings in dialects of the same language. For example, Australian English is full of words that basically are not used in any other country, even if they also speak English. For examples are Barbie, barbecue, thongs for flip flops, or macas for McDonald's. So they use such words, right? So these are the expressions, slangs they use, and that's a problem, right? So here they have given a list of most popular slang in Australia, right? So that is this is the popular slang of Australia. So there, that is there. Hmm. It takes a lot of cultural knowledge to be able to understand and translate such as expressions. They are one of the most common problems with translation, particular machine translation. So machine translation, metaphor and similes go in the same direction as idioms and expressions, meaning they say something in more visual language. For example, metaphor is to say someone has a heart of gold, right? While simile is to call them stubborn as a mule, right? So that is problem, right? Metaphor and similes go in the same direction as idioms and expressions, meaning they say something in more visual language, right? So that's a problem, because here for meaning in metaphor simply in metaphor simply and what we can say idioms, phrases, expressions, so that you they use visual languages, right? So you can visualize. For example, if you say that she has a heart of gold, right? So gold you can imagine, and in simile this is a metaphor, heart of gold, and in simile that's a stubborn as a mule, right? So that is something challenging when you translate, because if you translate same words, so meaning will not be the same, right? So these two are often language and culture specific, and therefore possibly hard to translate. Sometimes equivalence exists. For example, in German you call someone as stubborn as a donkey. However, sometimes you have to come up with something yourself. So that's a donkey, sometimes someone, sometime other comparison. Okay. Now, missing words or concepts. So that's another problem you might run into, are words to translate that simply don't exist in another language, right? Now, there are many reasons that this can happen. It can be a culture specific problem, such as when the associated thing or action is not permitted or performed in a country. So then there are many reasons this can happen. It can be a cultural specific problem, such as when the associated things or action is not permitted or performed in a country. So in that case, you often have to find a description for missing word, or another roundabout way of translating it. So finally, in a nutshell, we can say that cultural difference and that's idioms, phrases which are used, which are made for that particular situation or particular culture, so that cannot be easily changed through language. That idea cannot be changed. So this is the problem, right? Now, literary translation problem, right? A specific area for problem with translations is literary translation. That means translating literary works like books or poetry. It possesses specific challenges, because this content is very different from say website translating, or the translation of business documents, right? So this a business document somewhat can be translated by machine easily, but then poetry and books, and that's a very tough literary work cannot be translated, because that is something, that is not something, that is That is more and more culture, and that is something which is our culture, which is our what we can say that feeling, that's a message, that's a emotion, sentiments, something like this, right? Now, preserving the style of the source. So first of all, literature is creative. A translation not only has to bring across the information it contains, but also preserve the art in it, right? So that is, literature is creative, right? And a translation only has to bring across information, right? So translation is just bring across information it contains, but also preserve the art in it. So how to preserve the art in it, right? The original tone and intent, atmosphere, style, it should evoke the same understanding and feeling in the target language as in the original. So that's a problem. Now that is why literary translation is often harder to do, because it is more artistic. Literary translation, because literary part is more artistic, and you are basically rewriting a book or other creative work in another language. So that's a something, rewriting a book actually. This is especially true for older works that use the style of certain epoch, right? So that is that particular era, they have used that particular tone. So translators need to be able to emulate that, and which can take a lot of research, because that feeling, how to frame the words when you translate something so into target language, you have to find out how to frame the words so that same expression, same feeling, same message can be conveyed. Okay, so if you really like a book that was originally written in another language, you actually also admire the translator's work. Why? Because he or she must have taken a lot of uh, pain to change it. However, people do translation. Bible is translated into number of languages. Mahabharata, Gita, scriptures, and famous works of Kalidas, Shakespeare, number of languages, right? And Hamlet, and so many works have been translated. But that's a big challenge, and then they must have taken a lot of pain, and that's the same message then only they are able to deliver, right? Because translator credit go should go to translator. Okay, now, translating literary devices. So besides staying true to original work, there are also certain parts in literature that make up its literariness, right? Literariness means uh, that's a what we can say that one person in हिंदी which is called साहित्यकार. तो साहित्यकार लेखक है, लेकिन उसके अंदर वो जो साहित्यिक भाषा, जो उसका साहित्यिक एटीट्यूड है, वो लाना इट्स अ बिग चैलेंज, राइट? सो दैट you might run into while translating them. A good example here are the poems and songs in Lord of the Rings, right? And there are many of them. Here is just one of them, right? So that is, there are many of them. Here is just one of them. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under the stone, nevermore to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the dark Lord lifts up his hand over Dead Sea and withered land. As a translator of these books, you would have to rewrite them not only in a new language but also preserve their rhyme schemes. That is again problem. Preserve the rhyme scheme, length, rhythm, all the while uh, transporting the same subject matter, not transcription but transporting also the same subject matter. Sounds like tall order. that is because it is, right? So that's a thing. Now there are even more considerations like this, like alliterations, right? So the alliterations is the it's a repetition of consonants in the beginning. So alliteration, tongue twisters, right? So that is same translation, same meaning to be mentioned. So that translating alliterations, tongue twisters, when characters talk in different dialects and you need to express that it in another language as well, all are challenging. Now problems with machine translation. Now machine translation is a very common these days as systems have become a lot more sophisticated. So now systems are advanced systems, so then machine translation is very common. However, there are still issues to consider, not 100% reliable. However, machines are very advanced and they even understand feelings because of senses and all high tech devices. But then still there are some issues. That's a, of course, the first problem is that machine translation is often quite literal, right? Machines don't have the same awareness of context, right? The problem is that machine do not have the same awareness of the context, what context is there, and culture as a human translator has, so that he will be able to understand, his heart, his brain understand that context and then that culture. So they are also not a subject matter expert in a particular area. Machine is not subject matter expert, right? And then a particular area, but more of general service provided. They are just service provider, they are not expert, right? So this is problem. Now that's a for that reason it's almost always best to supplement machine translation with a check by human translator. So that's a, it will be done by machine, but that's a check will check by the machine human translator. They can correct any glaring mistake, right? And as well as make more nuanced decisions than algorithm. So that's a decision taken by human being, then algorithm which is set in machine, right? Now more suitable for certain types of content than others. Because of the problems with accuracy, machine translation is best suitable for less complex types of content. So accuracy, machine translation is good, the best suitable for less complex types of contents. So if content is not complex, then machine can be done the same work. Things like business content, website content, etc., where the style or character of the work is less important, right? A machine often simply cannot perform the some work as a literary translation. So this is again a very big problem. Why? Because things like business content and website content is where the style or character of the work is less important. So that is, no style and characters are not much important, but that's a import which is important in literary work. So that's a work as literary translator. So that a machine often simply can not perform cannot perform the same work as a literary translator. That is the difference. Yet machine translation still has a place, especially for speeding up the initial process, right? So that's for speed, and it's also great for simpler content. So that's a simpler content easily, like a moment, within a moment it can be change, and content where 100% accuracy is not that important. In for that, where 100% accuracy is not required, so for that purpose machine translation is very good, very useful, right? So that is there. Okay. Now you know who does not have a problem with website translator translate press. So because translations can come with problems, the last thing you want to do is struggle with implementing them. At least for your WordPress website, the tool they have given here, right? So that is there. And then translate press, and they are guiding you how to do it, so that is something you can use. And finally, from this side, yeah, they are guiding how to use a machine, right? How to change image, right? So if you wish to no, so I will read for you from here that first of all, Translate Press offers 100% translation completeness. It allows you to translate anything from your website content over widgets and menus to themes, plugins, and more. And that is because, unlike other translation plugins, Translate Press looks at other rendered website HTML, right? And here the previous on the right allows you to navigate to the page you want to convert to another language this way, right? So then they are guiding you how to do it, right? So you can use their direction and get translated material. Okay, so thank you so much, god bless you. I think you must have got the idea, right? And let's see that if you have any problem, you can contact with me. Thank you so much, god bless you.